we are group Rising Cs, and today we're going to be discussing the work of Franz Kafka, specifically his book titled Metamorphosis. So we'll just dive right in. So our first question is Miss Muniz. Up to you.
Yes. Well, my question was why does Gregor decide to give up on life and not change his way of living, and not try to go to his human form, or try to go back with his family, to be closer to them. And I was wondering also, does he like to be a bug, or does he like the living? That's my question. What do you think?
I'll start it off. I think that one of the reasons that Gregor is really interested, I wouldn't say that he likes being a bug, and I wouldn't say that he dislikes being a bug. I think it has to do more with the idea that he can see his family life from a whole different perspective, and it gives him the first break that he's had in a very long time. So I think it's just, he doesn't necessarily prefer it one way or another, but I think he's enjoying seeing how his family dynamics are changing and what's going on differently in his family. So I just think it's more of an interest to see.
Yeah, I think that he really doesn't have a choice in the matter. Mm-hmm. I think it's just that he's in this position, and it's almost like he's in kind of an out-of-body experience, because he's kind of removed from the whole situation with his family, and he's stuck in this kind of trap where all he can do is view his family live on, and also have to address the problems of not having him there. So I don't know if it's he chooses. I think he's stuck. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's happy at first, but I think he's just stuck in this state.
Mm-hmm. I also think it's interesting how he has these struggles as a salesman to then now a struggle being a bug, and just from the beginning how he's how do I get off of my back, and what are all these legs? It's not necessarily he's, I think we talked about this in class, he's not freaking out about being a bug. It's just the next struggle, okay, how am I going to get over this obstacle? It's just more about the struggle transfers from one aspect of life to just a whole another aspect of being a bug.
Right. I think it's almost so fantastical of a situation.
Yeah.
That there isn't a I think almost in his mind there's no point in thinking about how this happened or where it's going to go, because the only thing that he can grasp onto that he can live with is working on what he knows and focusing on that, and that's almost in denial of the situation, but at the same time I think it's the only way that he can deal with it.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely his coping mechanism.
And I think
I think he thinks that he can't he doesn't really feel he can leave his room, and he kind of is just taking things as they come, and he's not getting any support from anyone, so why would he feel he can make any changes? And no one seems to really want to help him to make any changes. So I think he thinks that he just has his room and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, but I also think that he's more too shocked at first to even consider the fact that he really is a bug. So, remember the first thing that he wanted to do when he found out, he wanted to go to work, and I don't think a bug makes a very good salesperson, but
really? Yeah, I think that's also true. I think this might lead well into our second question, Miss Fisk.
So my question is just, why of all of the professions in the world that Gregor could have been, why was he a salesperson, and what significance does that play into the book as a whole, as well as why did he turn into a bug of all things?
I'll start that off. Well, just the way that his mindset was, and the way that he seems to be, he wanted I don't think he really wanted the job due to the fact that he had to pay off a debt, but also it seemed it was just a very stressful and taxing job, and it sort of I felt related to him being in a bug. It sort of made it seem he was already in this state, but he hadn't gone through the metamorphosis of actually turning into a physical bug. It's just how his mind was.
Yeah, I really like that, because it was kind of when I was thinking traveling salesman, I was almost an annoyance, something that's going to try and knock on my door and cold call me. I just thought it's bugging me, so I thought it was kind of it was funny when I was reading. I was oh, of course, it's going from a traveling salesman to a bug.
Yeah,
I also think that
comical,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I saw it enough when that he had to find like a job, like either like a salesman or like whatever, so he can help his family to pay the debt. So like maybe it was just like not like he wanted to be a salesman, but maybe he was good at it, and the way that he managed to like not miss work like for 5 years, like never, and not be like sick one day and then like go to the metamorphosis, what happened to him, and be like a bug and then still worry about like going to the job so he can pay his family debt. Like maybe he was like, he had like this sense of responsibility that maybe salesperson had. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it just shows the complete contrast of personalities. Like when you think of the salesperson, like you were saying, it's someone who's like extremely persistent, like people close their doors in their faces and like they still keep going, and they're nonstop. And I think it's a total contrast to like his personality as a bug. Like he is just laying around on the floor and like doesn't really know what to do with himself, and like at first does want to go to work, but that like immediately drifts away and he has no motivation to do anything. And I think it's just like used to show the contrast between his life now and then his life before.
I somewhat disagree in the sense that like he doesn't, like we start the book off with him being a bug. Like he doesn't turn into a bug. Like he does, but like we don't see any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that his state is like he is a bug, and I don't know if it really matters like why he's a bug, honestly, in the sense that like I think that it's really more of like, okay, he is a bug and he like this is who he is. Like we don't know anything else. So I think almost Kafka sees that as like this is who this character embodies, and really like we need to like look more at like the family and what the like effects, because like he doesn't really change a whole lot throughout the story.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, he like kind of stays pretty stagnant and like accepts the fact that he is a bug, and more is like not accepting of what is occurring with his family. And I think that like that kind of is more where Kafka is going, in the sense that like he wants like us to like just like accept the fantastic like craziness of the situation.
But you think that because of that, like we don't know him as a human being, so that's why like as a bug, like we don't know how he was, and then as a bug we know how he is, and that's why he chose to be a salesperson or what?
Oh, I don't think he chose to be a salesperson, but like
Yeah.
I think that like he just is a bug, and like we are sitting here as readers, like sitting here being like, why is he a bug? And we're constantly thinking back, why is he a bug? Why is he thinking about why he is a bug? And all this stuff, but like really like it doesn't matter.
Right.
But I
Right,
think
it
it's
doesn't
significant
like
because like bugs are like people don't like bugs typically, and like they crawl on the ground. People they get killed like a lot. Like I think it has a lot of significance, and I think like in life, salespeople are typically like so low on the totem pole and like viewed as such slimy, like gross people. Like you think about a car salesman, and like if I were to compare them to an animal, I would pick a bug. So I think it more speaks to like not his personality necessarily, because I feel like he's very genuine and he tries to take care of his family, but just more of like the profession as a whole.
But are we getting that from our own opinion, or are we getting that from what Kafka is actually saying? Because I feel like what
Yeah.
I think it's our own opinion.
Like
It's
our
our-
predetermined.
right,
Yeah.
and so I think
expectations.
that's like necessarily the question.
Well, I think that actually, not to be cheesy, but I think that does lead to our next question, which was Maggie's, because it brings up like, well, I'll let her ask it, but I think it kind of highlights what we've been talking about like, is there a metamorphosis, or are we bringing our own predetermined questions to it?
Right. So mine is, why doesn't anyone in Gregor's family or Gregor himself help him to try to change back into a human? So is it because he's always been this way, or is it just because they don't want to help him, or
Yeah. I just think that I don't really have an answer, but I just think it's interesting how your question kind of transposes what we were talking about, because we're all saying like, well, why did he turn into a bug? And you're saying like, well, what about the transformation back? Like, did he, like, I wonder if that's what Kafka's hinting at. Like, are we supposed to like go backwards, or are we supposed to like accept how we've been changed and like move forward? But I think you had probably a better answer to that.
I don't know if it's better. I just kind of thought, like, going back to our discussion in class about, you know, how it seems the family takes advantage of Gregor for the money aspect, which, you know, comes up a little bit later. But, like, we were talking about that, and so it's almost kind of like they actually didn't, I don't want to say they didn't care, but it's almost like, oh, great, we lost our money source.
What are we going to do now?
What are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Let's focus on what we can do, and just kind of, let's put them in the room, like, lock them away almost, and not.
Horrified.
Yeah, I feel
and
like
I
it's-
think okay.
Okay. I just think it's really interesting because that's as I was reading the story, it was like what I was reading for the whole time was like when they finally figured out how to change him more magically, he just changed back, and like I think it is interesting because at the end then he's just dead, and it's like, well, that was very anticlimactic.
Yeah,
I thought we
yeah.
would have like a better ending to the full
Yeah.
story, but like I think it is a great question to say why weren't they concerned about turning him back? And I think it is true because they're so self-centered, and like we can see that throughout the story of like them just being concerned about the money situation and all these other scenarios that like they're only concerned about like, okay, well, now we don't have money, I need to get a job, and then they go and they live their lives, and like they're not really concerned about making sure that he has food that he likes and like doing these other things. So I think it's just selfish of the family members.
And I think it all goes back to like the like complete hopelessness of the situation. Like the whole story, like everyone is hopeless about the fact that like anything good can come out of this, and like they just like the only time that it references like him turning back is like literally the mother was like, we shouldn't move anything around because he might want it back, like when he's like back, but there's no discussion of like how that will happen or like what will happen. So at least that we know of, like we know they talk, but like we don't know like that's like the only specific one about him turning back, but like it's still in this like hopeless mindset, and I think that's like another thing that comes back of just like this situation isn't about like, it's like Kafka kind of like going like, well, it's not about us like thinking about what's gonna make this better. It's like, oh, sometimes life is freaking hopeless. Like
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know, I see it in this point that maybe the family didn't help Gregor, but Gregor helped his family, you know, to find, like, he was the only one that was working, and he was the only one that was, like, producing money and, like, trying to pay the debt or whatever, and the sister wasn't doing anything, and she was, like, capable to do something, and the mom, too, and, well, the father worked, but, like, and then in that sense, like, he turned, and then the family forgot about him, like, or they didn't, like, pay attention to him because they were worried about the money, but then later on, like, they had to do something, so they had to find a job, and then the sister had to work, and the mom had to work too. So in that sense, I see it like maybe they didn't help them, like they didn't help him, but maybe he helped them to find like a path where to go.
That's true. Yeah, it's interesting how in both situations he's helping them. Like one way he's helping them by giving, and the other way he's helping by not giving. But I also had like a follow-up question to Maggie's is like, or Miss Max. In the original scene when the boss comes over or the manager and they're like luring him out of his room and then he comes out and it's kind of like this dramatic scene, is there any moment where, I can't remember if the parents are like, I think the dad just like shoos him into his room but doesn't like say, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to fix you? I think it's more just like a focus on, okay, great, you've screwed up and like let me hide you in your room and not help you. Is that pretty much how that scene goes?
Yeah, I feel like the whole situation is just, it's so bizarre that they can't really wrap their minds around. That's why they're not like trying to think about how they can change it back. They're probably wondering how it happened in the first place for a little while, which is why it took the mom so long to ask, like, what can we do to change you back? Because, like, I would personally be like, okay, what just happened?
Yeah.
And
But
I'm pretty
also,
sure
like,
everyone else would be the same way.
Is this bug even actually my son? Like, they don't,
Yeah.
like, there's a level, like,
And
I don't actually know.
Yeah, and it's not like, oh, he screwed up. It's not like you got drunk and you didn't went to the job. Like you became a bug. Like it's not his fault. It's not like I want to be a bug, you know.
Well, that actually leads into my question. I think I probably touched on this in class, but I'm just curious to go deeper in like a group setting. But I was just wondering, does Gregor's bughood seem to be how he wants to be? To me, it seems as if he's most comfortable as a bug. I know in the beginning, I cited the pages here, but he mentions he has like a newfound sense of well-being. He talks about or envisioning a life of acceptance and ease. He enjoys the fact that he's standing up for himself. He talks about how he's gonna like justify this to the people who are about to see him on the other side of the door. So I guess I just wonder like, I don't know. There just seems to be a sense of like comfort in his new, or maybe not new. Maybe that's because we've only seen him as a bug, like his bughood. I'm just curious what you guys thought.
It's in page 38, right?
It starts, like 38. I guess like, and I touched on this in class again, but like how it almost seemed like he was preparing for something bad to happen, or he knew it was impending because he was like almost doing damage control. Like, you know, when something bad happens to you, sometimes you're just like, how am I going to fix this? You're not even wondering like, how did this happen? You're more like, what am I going to do? So I just feel like that's kind of where he's coming from, which makes me wonder if he just like has accepted it already and like the morning he wakes up.
Well, you can. I keep cutting everyone off. I think it's mostly a state of shock for Gregor, and like he's just so used to his routine of having to wake up and make that specific train and like go to work every day and like support his family. So I feel like he was like just in total shock of like the situation, and felt like at any point it would fix itself and he would snap out of it and it would go back to normal. And that was more of like why he was just more focused on like the future and more like, and he's also so selfish as a character that I think it was more about like he was worried about making his family members upset, and that's why he didn't want to open the door. It wasn't really, it's never been about him or what he wants. It's always about how it's affecting other people in his life.
I think on the other hand, like he might have in some way realized that like have an underlying sense of relief in the sense that he's like
a bug.
Yeah, like and well, not necessarily that he's a bug.
He's like living
but like
his truth.
He is living like in a way where he like is just like dealing with things as he can deal with, but he's dealing with his own stuff. He's not sitting there like he is worrying about them, but like he is not like I don't know. The responsibility is no longer on him anymore. Like they have to deal with it, and then especially once they start dealing with it, like there's this like level where it's just like he begins to just live for himself, and that's when he becomes more comfortable as a bug. Is when he's just like living in his room and not thinking about what they're doing as much, and like just hanging out.
And also he got used to be like that. Like it's not like you get used to it like really quick. It's not like it happened to me, but you know that you you. But for example, like you go. For me, like I was living in another place with another culture or whatever, and then you come here and then it's something different, but you get used to it. Like in the long run, you are like, okay, like this is this, and then this happened, or you have to do this or whatever, and then you figure it out. So I think that's what happened to him. Like once he accepted it, or maybe once he realized that, okay, this is my form, my animal form or whatever. Like now, like. I'm gonna have to get used to it, so that's why I think he started like moving around and then crawling or whatever. I don't know. I think so.
Well, it wasn't a choice either. Like he just kind of had to deal with it as it happened. So.
But I really think that just him, like I'm trying to imagine him before this happening, which I know is kind of like but like. Him before this happening, like I can only imagine that quality of like just working like a dog, like probably not concerned about himself, like just trying to get the money in to pay down the debt, to get money for his family because like of all this pressure. So he's not like thinking about anything. So I think when he wakes up as a bug, he doesn't have time to process a lot of this stuff. He's just like, okay, I have to go to work. And then as the book goes on, it kind of like is almost as if he's like unfreezing himself, like. Okay, like I don't have to go do this. Like I can start thinking about me, kind of like what you said, like you know, getting more comfortable with him being as a bug and like working his way through it. So that's how I saw it. I saw it like not that he was like really shocked or just like he was in like this mojo, almost like this trance of just getting like this stuff done, and that's what he had to do.
Well, I wanted to bring it back to before this and just talk about how. You know, like the damage control aspect. His boss came in and told him that his job was insecure, And as a salesperson, you typically know when you've done a bad job because you get, like, your job is all dictated upon how many sales you have.
Mm-hmm.
So possibly, like, he didn't know that this was going to be what happened. He may have been thinking he was going to get fired. And it may have been more of a sense of relief that only this happened instead of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
But also, like, what, like, I know that it's a job or whatever, but if you didn't, like, that's, I think that I asked this in class, like, if you didn't miss one day in 5 years, like, and even if you own someone something, like, it's not like because you miss one day, he's gonna go to your house and be like, what's happened, like, what are you not at work, so, you know, like, it's just, like, super intense what he does, what the manager does to him, like, go to his house and, like,
I
invade
wonder if
his
it's like
privacy.
his nightmare in a way, like a metaphor for his like.
I was
I
always
don't
waiting for
know.
him to like wake
Wake
up.
up, like a dream
as I was
sequence.
reading, I was like, waiting
Yeah.
to wake up.
But maybe even not that. Like maybe he actually isn't nightmaring in his dream world. But maybe it's just like an exaggeration of like, you know, when you do something that your boss, like, you don't show up. Like your biggest fear is like running into your boss.
Yeah.
You know. So like maybe that's like this personified. Like,
Would
oh my
you
god,
Friday?
my boss is gonna like show up at my parents' house and like lure me out of my bed because I'm a bug. Like I don't know. Not that I mean, obviously this is all fantastical. So I wonder if it's just like an exaggerated fear of his.
Well, another, like, which is how I rationalized it, was that his dad's indebted to his boss.
Yeah.
So, the manager showing up is just, like, probably the manager knew that he had to be there to pay off the debt. It's probably just more like the boss's way of saying, like, look,
forget.
like, you have to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then, like, either way, don't you think, like, it's just super intense to go, like, even if you owe someone something, it's like, oh yeah, I missed one day, I'm not gonna pay you anymore, like, it's just one day, and
It's definitely extreme.
Yeah,
to,
like,
take a
yeah.
train or come all the way out
And
there.
a bug walking around, like, trying to sell something.
Right.
Well,
yeah,
it
and
kinda
maybe that's why
reminds
he
me of a-
was, like, so intense to go to work, because he
Right.
knew that maybe he was gonna show up.
Well, it kind of reminds me of like a debt collector. I don't know if you ever like owed money on a bill or something, but then they like, you know, you get like first notice, second notice, and then once like I know he didn't have this like friendly grace period, but then once that's over, they like harass you. So I wonder if it just skips that whole grace period because he obviously doesn't have any like leniency with his boss. It just goes straight into like harassing.
Well, maybe that's already happened. Maybe
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
already gotten
true.
notices, and now it's like so far behind.
Yeah.
It's-
Like you have to be here or I'm gonna hunt you down.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we exhausted some options for that question. So I guess moving on to Joanna's question.
Oh, my question was about what we think Kafka's commentary is on neglect, because I think that was something that we brought up a lot, was the question of whether or not, like, the neglect of Gregor is, like, what role that plays in life, and, like, whether or not we think Kafka, like his opinion of, like, whether that was, like, a bad thing or whether that was actually, like, something that, like, was meant to happen. Yeah.
Do you mean to happen, like, to turn into a bug?
No, like
To be neglected?
like
Character.
that
how his
neglect is,
family
like,
treated
that
him.
neglect was, like, something that needed to happen in order for the family to, like, be free, in order for the family, like, to move on. Like, could they sustain themselves if they were continuing to give him the attention?
Okay,
they
so
were giving him.
you're talking about like Gregor neglecting his duties to get
No, I'm talking about the family
Family
neglecting
neglecting
him.
I
the
see it more
family
as
neglecting
like,
him.
oh, yeah.
Or, like, vice versa.
Vice versa.
Honestly, like,
Okay, yeah.
neglect in
Neglect,
general
okay.
of,
Yeah.
like, what is Kafka telling us about, like, that role in humanity of, like,
Yeah.
whether or not
I mean,
that
I
plays
feel
on
like
people.
as a family, you just don't give up when you're like, on your like, for example, if a mother, like, I don't know, like something happened to his son, go to jail, or like he killed someone or something, like he's
like
your
tough
son,
love.
like
Yeah, like,
you
you
have
just
to
have to deal
you
with
have
what
you have
you've
to
done.
stuck by him because he's your son. So like reading this and that she's afraid to his son, or then his sister like shows him love, but then she start like being mean to him or whatever. Like that's like, where's the like family union? Like now that he's a bug and now that he cannot give you money or like he cannot work, now you don't like pay attention to him, you know?
I mean, I think the neglect in the story is pretty great. Like, the sister is bringing him like rotten vegetables and all these things on old newspaper, like I was like, okay, I understand he's a bug and he doesn't want normal food, but you can't put it on like a plate or like something like
your brother.
Right, exactly. And like I think like in a way, if they hadn't neglected him, they would have never like set themselves free and like gone out of the house and like lived their lives in the end. But I do think that like neglect is a huge theme throughout the story, and like it really just shows like how the family was so selfish at so many points, and even when he was so selfless.
I think it was a huge like. So as I was reading this, at first I was like, okay, this is just so stupid. Like when like
Tell us
I
how
was
you really feel.
Yeah, well I was like reading it, and I'm like, okay, like when's he gonna wake up? Like is he already dead? Like I was trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then just as I was reading it was kind of like, you know what, this is actually a great commentary on like a little bit deeper on like quality of life issues.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, okay, here's like the brother, like you said, eating rotten food, you know, kept in this room. The mother like won't even see him, like they're like trying to figure everything out. And even before that, you know, here he is like almost as a slave to his family. You know, so it's just like as I was like the neglect, it was kind of like it was freeing in a way towards his family because his family was able to move on. They were able to not like kind of keep him under their thumb in a way, but it was also like, you know, how could you treat your family member like that? You know, let's say he wasn't a bug. Like let's say he was in a car crash and, you know, was a vegetable, you know, in a sense. Like, would you just keep him locked away and then think about, okay, how am I going to get money? Like, he can't go out and work anymore. How am I going to get money?
Right.
So I thought it was like a great like quality of life issue because towards the end I didn't think of him as a bug anymore. I was like, okay, what else could he be? Like, could he be dead throughout this whole thing? Just like, you know, could he be a vegetable? Like, it was like this whole thing that I was just thinking about. So I think neglect is like, that was cool.
I think you bring up an interesting point because a lot of it I think is out of fear though, and that's why they're neglecting him. So I never really thought of it as
like coming to terms with everything, like
right.
fearful
Well,
of like
how they said like two people needed to be home all the time and like no one could ever be home alone with him, as if like he was going to almost do something to them. So I felt like the neglect came more from selflessness and also a touch of fear. And like I feel like if he was in a car crash and he was a vegetable and like on life support, like they would have definitely not given him the best care ever, but they wouldn't have necessarily neglected him to the extent that they ended up neglecting him.
Yeah.
I think the family used Gregor as an excuse in both situations. They used it in an excuse to like make money for them so that they could just do whatever they wanted, which was basically nothing because they could rely on him. And then after he goes through this transformation, they use it as an excuse to like start having their own lives. Like they think, oh, because he's like this, like I can finally be free. But like, do they really feel that way? Who knows? And I think to like relate it to a hunger artist, like it's kind of the similar theme of neglect, but more for like entertainment purposes. Like this, we kind of talked about in class. Like I think you mentioned that like they could have used him for some kind of entertainment or something, but like this is about like a man who's starving and he's used as entertainment and like people get enjoyment out of it, and how like no one seems to really care about his actual well-being, and then he just dies.
And it actually goes back to like they never quite like saw Gregor as like a person. They never like addressed him as a person, and I think that's also true for like hunger artists. Like I think that plays in like nobody ever asked like the hunger artist if he was like like or like why he was doing this. Like no one ever asked why he's doing this, and like he's like it was because no food tastes good to him, and like he died because of that, because he didn't want to eat any food. Like, and that was like, if someone had just like addressed him as a person in this form that he was in, like maybe there would have been more. And like that's also a form of neglect of like not being like, I'm not considering that like you are a person and like you need to be considered as a person and like an integral part of our lives, because I don't think that was like like part of it at all.
I also think you just like spread this thought in my mind, like it's also sometimes like a greater lesson of just like how people can be in relationships with other people. Like you have to meet them where they are. Like okay, we need to acknowledge like he's a person, or like this guy didn't want that food. Like instead of applying our like mentality or our standards to somebody, it's more like we have to like sometimes go down to their level or go up to their level. Just like it's not about like being above or below somebody, but it's more just like coming to where they are and like meeting them in their struggle. And the same like for I think for Gregor it goes the other way too. Like his family needed to like do the same for him, and there was a disconnect there.
And maybe he wouldn't have been as desensitized like as a bug, like and get more like as comfortable if they had like actually like thought of his like own emotions.
Right. Yeah. I think it's an important point to make. Okay, so are we good to move on to the last and final question?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to hand off to Mr. Tominick.
All right. Well, the reason I didn't talk in the last one because I didn't know how to bring it up without addressing my question, which is, was the whole story just a metaphor for mental illness and its effects on both, like the person suffering from it and the family as well?
Mm-hmm.
'Cause that's personally how I read the whole story as.
I did too, or somewhat similar.
Right.
A very major struggle.
I think like what I see with that, if we're relating to this to mental illness, is that if you're close to someone who's going through mental illness, probably at first you don't know how to handle the situation. And it's not that you necessarily don't treat them like a human, but you may not treat them like themselves anymore, or like how you once treated them, because they might not be acting in that way. And I think that you yourself, if you're going through mental illness, you might not really know how to present yourself either. And that might also cause people to not know how to respond to you.
When I like was reading it in the beginning, I really felt like he was depressed, and so he was like laying in bed and like trying to like get himself to like go through his daily motions and like live his life, but just couldn't. And he was using this excuse of like, I'm a bug, but I felt like it was just more of like just not being able to do his everyday activities anymore because of his just full takeover of depression, and then like living in his room and not really leaving, and like feeling like he was like locked in there, and then watching his family take on all these roles because they had to, but really I felt like initially reading it that it was because of his depression.
Yeah, I agree. I think I did say it like that. Like he was so down about not relying to his family that he just started like didn't caring, like maybe at the end about himself, or he just thought less of himself because he didn't have like the support that a family is supposed to give you when you are going through a rough patch or something. I don't know if I saw it like you as a metaphor for like an illness, but like that, I don't know, maybe depression, it was one of them.
I definitely saw the bugness. This kind of goes back to my question about how, like, do we think he feels comfortable in this state of being a bug? But, like, it makes me wonder if it was just, like, a metaphorical or physical, actually, like, cry for help in some way. Like, I don't know if he was depressed or, like, maybe he was in his 5 years of working every single day. But it was more to me, like, he woke up, like Mr. Paley said, and was just like, okay, like, something different has happened, and then it made me wonder, like, did he, I guess that's why I asked, did he want to be a bug? Because I wondered if he brought it upon himself in some way to, like, switch it up and, like, get out of the rut he was in if he was depressed, or just, like, communicate in some way to his family, like, something needs to change here because this is not working for me.
But they're so, like, I don't know, like, wouldn't you have attention? Like, this is, like, a situation where they have, like, give him hardly any attention, like, by the end of it.
Well,
Like,
I think that's
But
maybe
maybe
what he
from his
wants, because he's had
perspective,
so
too.
much pressure on him. Like, they give him so much attention in the beginning, like, are you going to get up for work? The mom is like, honey, are you going to miss your train? Like, he's probably berated every day for 5 years. Like,
Yeah.
when are you going to bring home the paycheck? Can we eat this week? So, to me, it was almost like
relief.
he needed to, like, not be
Yeah, he needs
the
Needed.
center of attention,
Yeah.
even if that meant that he was going to, like, dwindle. And, well, I don't think he wanted to die. I don't think, like, that's like another extreme, but I just
It's
think
almost like his death was
So would
free
you-
and well.
So
Yeah.
would you see that, like, would you think then that, like, the end, like, the family is freed from the fact that he, like, past, like, do you think they were at peace about it then?
Maybe I think both, like, if you see it, like, maybe for both of them it was freedom. Like, for him dying, it was freedom for him, and then for his family to see that he died because they didn't saw him as a person anymore. They saw him like as a bug or as a burden. Like, they were also relieved. They were also
Minimized.
free. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is it was mostly like the family and how like they reacted to him that made me think it was like a mental illness. Just because like at first they like did seem like they cared a lot, and then I don't know if anyone's like dealt with anyone suffering from mental illness, but after a while like you start to neglect them, like you start to like
get over it.
Desensitized.
yeah, you
from
get
it.
desensitized.
Yeah.
You sort of like start to like just hope, like you secretly hope that you know you can be freed from the situation. So I do feel like they were sad, but at the same time I feel like that they were like just glad that it was all over, because not only was it better for them, but like it's better than seeing him suffer anymore.
I think that's really insightful.
Yeah.
And I actually failed as a moderator because we have one more question left. I didn't number my questions correctly. So I'm actually going to punt the last question to Mr. Fraley.
So I think that, like, you know, we're talking a lot about freeing, and my question's kind of on the role of money and how Kafka uses it. Because it kind of seems that money is like this almost idolatry type symbol, but it also seems like it's very like enslaving. You know, like I thought it was kind of like, as I was reading it, I thought it was like enslaving to Gregor. Like, okay, he has to go out and work, and like that's all he can do. Like, go get the paycheck, get the paycheck, get the paycheck. But then also enslaving to the family. You know, that they couldn't leave. The father couldn't, like, you know, the father was getting unhealthy, he couldn't leave, and then finally they all had to. So I think my question is just kind of like the role of slavery. Like, do you think it's more deliberate, or do you think it's like just too kind of reading into it? You know, and the freeing, my follow-up question was going to be like, what was the freeing aspect like? But we kind of addressed that.
I think that you kind of touched on this, but money seemed to be like the centralized point of their like family unit. Like, that's what all of their discussions and all their thoughts like kind of revolved around. How they were going to make money now that he couldn't make money, and then like getting a job and the boss, all that stuff. And I kind of think that the family felt free like when Gregor was working for them, but they also seemed to feel free like when they had to start working for themselves. Like, there's that whole passage about how the dad comes home from work and he like looks so much better and is all dressed up and stuff, and that was seemed to be kind of freeing for him. And then the sister got to do some things that she wanted to do, but at the same time there was still this like element of sadness.
Well, I think that being a salesperson is very enslaving. Like, you're living off of commission, and if you're not making sales, you're not making money, and you don't have quality of life. So I think that's why he was so worried about not going to work to that one day as well. But it's also like, typically those people aren't making tons of money unless you're like killing it. But traveling salesman, like, it's a very enslaving type of labor. So I felt like that was definitely a main point throughout the story, and I think that the only way Gregor ever felt free was really by dying, because he knew as soon as he like got better and turned back into a human or got out of this depression, whatever it was that was wrong with him, he was going to have to go back to this hard life of traveling and working for commission and like not missing any days, and the only way to free him from his slavery and this debt would be to die.
But I don't know if it's necessarily the like work, because I think he honestly like didn't think twice whether or not he liked his work. But I think it was also like, okay, he was in this state and he no longer could handle like being in whatever mindset he was being in, you know? Like, I think it was like, okay, well, like, this is actually it. Like, my family is like done with me. I have no control over my world, and like there has been so much like pain, and it's been building and building and building, and now it's just like time to let it go.
Yeah, I did see like money, like, or slavery equals money, but I also see it like it's the same like outside, like in the real world or whatever, like outside this book, like people are a slave to the money, like they live, they live, they work to make money and to like, you know, like buy things or whatever, but for like the family, like money was everything and everyone was thinking about it, that they forgot to think about like the well-being of his son, of what was happening to him.
Well, I just want to like point out that they even like had it be directly enslaving by the fact that there was this huge debt on them, and that it sort of like made them feel trapped and like that they had to do this.
Yeah. I thought that, like, once I read that, I was like, kind of indentured servitude. Like, that's the one thing. that caught
Right,
my
yeah.
mind.
Yeah. It also goes back to just like the way the manager shows up and is like,
Yeah.
you know, he's
Yeah.
it hasn't even been 2 hours and he's late to work. And
It's like he's a
this
slave
guy-
driver.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely somewhat of like a freedom from, like in general, like a commentary on freedom, like freedom of like mindset, freedom from this construct of like consumerism and money and like work and like capitalism and all
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
stuff.
very anti-capitalist.
And it's
Yeah.
very much very anti-capitalism, and that just like that overall theme of like freedom from like the struggles of life, and that like
He'd
being
rather take
stuck.
death.
being
Yeah.
stuck in a situation that you don't want to be in.
Yeah, death is better.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's.
Being a
I
bug
think it's
is
just
better.
exaggerated.
Yeah.
Everything in here is totally exaggerated, but I think I think that's a really good insight into like what he was trying to escape and how he exaggerated his way, or how the way he got out of it was such an exaggeration to the point where he dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.